Good afternoon guys, welcome back to Maverick Baking and to another basics recipe video. Now if you saw the kind of last installment of this, essentially what I'm trying to do with this series is to bring you recipes that you might find useful in these ever-changing and ever-strange circumstances that we're in at the moment. Obviously a lot of us are finding ourselves in supermarkets with half-empty shelves, or we're finding ourselves at home with a lot of time on our hands. These are strange times and I want to do anything I can from my tiny kitchen to your kitchen to do what I can to help. In this episode, I want to show you how to make some very simple scones so that you can feed your family for lunch, for an afternoon snack, for breakfast, or just to get the kids involved in something if they end up off of school or off of nursery and you have a lot of time for them to fill. This is a simple recipe. It's one that doesn't require any fancy equipment and it can be made mostly with ingredients that you probably already have in the house, which is always nice. So let's get into it. Today's recipe is going to be for some simple Scottish style scones, or scones if you're posh or American. I'm going to be showing you how to make simple fruit scones, but this recipe will work just as well if you leave the raisins out to make lovely plain scones. Or you can add cheese, you can add spices, you can add chocolate chips, you can do whatever you like to this recipe within reason and it will still turn out delicious. Let's get started. As with all of my recipes, you will need to start with a big old bowl. To this bowl, we're going to add some self-raising flour. So in my bowl here, I have 225 grams of flour and a generous pinch of just standard, regular pouring table salt as well. So we're just gonna give this a little shake around to combine it, and then we're going to get some butter in. As with all of my recipes, I will have the full ingredients and method in the description box below, and also on my blog, Maverick Baking. To the bowl of dry ingredients, we're going to add some butter. Now, I know that not everyone keeps regular butter in their fridge, and I know that as supermarkets are becoming increasingly chaotic at the moment, you might only be able to find margarine. Margarine will also work in this recipe. You can even use things like coconut oil. For the best flavor and results, I would recommend butter, but obviously in your circumstances, use whichever kind of fats you can find. I'm using a Scottish unsalted butter because I've already added salt. If you only have regular salted butter or margarine, just add a bit less salt to the dough. So I'm going to cut 75 grams of this butter from the block, and I'm going to cut it into little cubes to make it easier to work with. Okay, so we have added our little cubed pieces, or roughly cubed pieces of butter to our dry ingredients. Now, I really don't need to emphasize the importance of having clean, freshly washed hands. At this stage, everyone is doing it way too much. I'm sure all of our hands are going to look 10 years older than they are in a couple of months' time from all the washing, but it is very important, so please do it. With your very clean hands, you're just going to get in here and you're going to start covering those butter cubes with the flour. And as you do that, you're going to just pick up handfuls and you're just gonna rub it together. You're gonna rub it together as if you were a child playing in a sand pit. And I cannot tell you how lovely and therapeutic this is. If you are someone who experiences anxiety, or you're someone who's found yourself feeling a lot more anxious, uncomfortable, or unsettled recently, I can't really emphasize enough how much being in the kitchen can help. I know that it obviously isn't therapeutic for everyone, but personally I really find that creating something that you know will bring joy or benefit or nutrition to other people is something that just relaxes me beyond belief. Plus you get to crush things between your bare hands, which is always fun. So you'll start to see that this is becoming a bit more kind of like breadcrumbs. We still have some large chunks of butter in here, which we just want to get broken up. This process essentially just rubs all of the butter directly into the flour so that it's nice and evenly distributed. Once we have done that, we'll add some wet ingredients to bring this into a nice kind of thick dough. We'll stamp out some scone shapes and we'll get them in the oven. Okay, so you will see at this point, now that all the butter is kind of nicely rubbed in, it almost looks like breadcrumbs. Not completely even, but we don't have any kind of big lumps or huge chunks of butter in there or any big dry patches of flour. It's just all nice and incorporated together. And that didn't take me any more than 5 minutes. So to this mixture, we're going to add our wet ingredients and we're going to add our raisins. Now, when I say fruit scones, I immediately jump to raisins, that's why I'm using them, but you can also use sultanas, you can use candied peel, cherries, dates, you can use whatever kind of fruit you like. Or as I said, at this stage, you can also add some cheese if you like. You can add some chocolate chips, some nuts, whatever you're into. Okay, let me talk you through what we are adding next. So we have added 3 tablespoons of sugar. Now you can use brown sugar, castor sugar, granulated sugar, even icing sugar. If you're completely out of sugar and you have any honey or maple syrup in the cupboard, you can also use that as well. I've added about 100 grams of raisins. I've added half a teaspoon of baking powder, and I've added an egg white. Now the yolk we will use to help glaze the scones before they go into the oven. The raisins, as I said, completely optional. The baking powder is just for an extra kick to help these rise. So I'm just going to use a spoon to mix this all together, adding just a little bit of milk here and there to help bind it into a dough. So scone dough is quite different to bread dough. Instead of kind of activating the gluten, when we're making scones, we basically want to work the dough as little as possible. We want to keep these fluffy, we want to keep them kind of moist and crumbly. We don't want them to be dense and chewy. Okay, so after less than 2 minutes of stirring with a couple of splashes of milk added, I used soy milk just because it's what I had in the fridge, but you can use any kind of milk you like. This is what our dough looks like. It's kind of wet, but it's also stiff. Those raisins are kind of nicely incorporated and it hasn't been mixed around too much. Let's get these stamped out. So at this stage, we're going to want to make sure that we have a nice, clean, clear work surface. We want to make sure it's been kind of disinfected beforehand in the current circumstances, and we want to make sure that we have plenty of room to work. So you're going to want to dust your nice clean work surface with just some spare flour. This doesn't have to be self-raising or plain flour, just whatever you have handy. This is so that the dough doesn't stick to your work surface. So at this stage, you're just going to want to tip your scone dough out onto your work surface. You're also going to want to give it and your hands a little light dusting of flour as well, just so nothing is sticking together. Now in this recipe, we're not going to be using a rolling pin. We want to put as little force on this dough as possible. Like when I said when we were mixing it, scone dough should be handled as little as you genuinely can. So I'm just going to use some clean floured hands to gently pat it flat and stamp some shapes out. And when I say gently, I literally mean pressing this. Imagine you're a cat. Imagine you're a cat settling onto someone's comfy lap or onto someone's cushion or their couch. You just want to gently, gently, gently pat this out. So I've patted my dough out now. It's probably about 1 inch to 2 inches thick, a few centimeters, and we're going to stamp our scones out either using the straight side of a cutter or a fluted cutter. It's completely up to you. But first I'm going to kind of give it a good flouring like I did with my hands. You just want to make sure that the cutter does not stick too much to your dough. Where we are going to put the scones is onto this baking tray lined with some greaseproof paper, because that's going to go straight into the oven once these are all stamped out. So we're just going to stamp these until we have used up as much space as we can with our cutter. You can then kind of scrap the dough together and re-roll it to make some more. Okay, so I managed to get 6 scones out so far, and I should be able to get a few more when I re-roll, but let me get these onto my tray first. Okay, so we're now at the stage where I have 6 little scones all stamped out and placed onto my lined baking tray. The oven is preheated. We also have a little bit of scone dough left over and some flour left over, so that once we bake these ones, we can get another round into the oven. At the moment, just before I bake the first round of scones, in this little bowl, I have some milk and the yolk from the egg white that I used earlier. I'm going to mix these together with a little pastry brush, but you can also do this with your hands really, or with a little teaspoon. And then I'm going to just brush it over the top of the scones to give them a nice color when they're baking. Just gently brushing it over. You don't want to completely drown them in it. You just want to give them a nice little coating. You can do it on the top and around the sides. You can do it just on the top if you like. It's completely up to you. Okay, so here we have our stamped out, spaced out, egg washed scones. I'm now going to bake these in this nice hot oven for approximately 15 minutes. So here we have our super, super basic and easy fruit scones. Now, let me just give you a little kind of close-up of one. This is what the scone recipe looks like when it's finished. Now, I do quite enjoy a wide scone like this, so I tend to roll my dough out thinner than some people and stamp it wider because it gives me more space to spread on butter and jam. But if you do like a kind of taller scone, then if you keep the dough kind of thicker before you stamp it out, then basically the thicker they start with, the thicker they will rise to. So This, if you use this recipe and roll it out to the same width I did, this is what you will get. If you keep it thicker before stamping, you will get taller. I think that makes sense, and I used far too many words to explain it. So obviously scones can be eaten as they are. I know that some countries eat them plain. I know that I've seen kind of Americans or Canadians eat them plain with a cup of coffee, but they have to be eaten the proper Scottish way, if you ask me. So throughout England, the debate often rages as to whether the cream goes on before the jam or the jam goes on before the cream. In Scotland, typically we don't use cream. At fancy afternoon teas and things we will, but the standard way that I was brought up with my Highland heritage is to eat a scone with butter and jam. So here we have what I consider to be the proper way to eat a scone. We have butter, we have jam, it's still warm, and it's delicious. It's buttery, it's crisp underneath, it's soft, it's fluffy. It feels like a treat without being too kind of sugary. The raisins add a little bit that sweetness, obviously as does the jam. This recipe and scones in general are such a great thing to make, especially in times like this. They're quick to make, they're cheap to make. You can double up this recipe, you can have this recipe depending on how many you're feeding and how long you'd like to have them for. This can be breakfast, this can be a snack, whatever you need to keep your soul perky, to keep you well fed, to keep the kids entertained, just to try and keep some kind of normality amongst all the chaos and the panic and the sadness that's around just now. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this recipe, and you would like some more kind of ideas for back to basics things, let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to give the video a big fat thumbs up. In the meantime, to my viewers from all over the world, whichever situation you're in, whether you're working from home, whether you're in self-isolation, whether you're quarantined nationally, whether you're just trying to go about your life as normally as possible, stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you always for being here. See you for the next one.